Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good topic today, let's do it. Have you ever had an unexplained or paranormal experience? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. There was this guy who I used to work with called Dan. Dan was a chill guy who everyone got on with, but a little bit weird at times. He used to believe in a lot of things. Aliens, ghosts, government experiments, the lot. He wasn't religious, but that's besides the point. Anyway, while messing around at work, he's explaining stupid things to us about how he's seen spaceships and how all this paranormal stuff happens when he's at home. Some of it is quite ridiculous, but I listen anyway. A couple of weeks later, he invites me around for a few beers. I was driving, so I couldn't really drink, but I still went over. We get on to the subject of ghosts, and he starts explaining things to me like how he has once eaten an apple and it exploded just as he went to take a bite. I laughed it off and thought it could have just been some sort of pressure with the way he was holding it, causing it to explode. He was deadly serious about this. He pulled out a few pictures of this apple and started showing me the damage it had done to him. There was a picture of him with a cut on his cheek caused by this apple. However, I was still not convinced of this ghost he had in the house. He was not messing around. He said, "Hold on, actually, I'll show you." He pulls out this shoebox full of pictures from around the house. He says, "Just flick through those, you'll see." I sigh and say, "Okay." I'm going through these photos of a recent Christmas, the usual photos, kids opening presents, the family having Christmas dinner, having a few drinks at night, a group shot. Stop. This was the photo that left me in awe. His family was standing in front of this mirror, and I shit you not, in the reflection of the mirror was an Edwardian girl, smiling straight at the camera. This was not one of those could be a smudge type of thing. It was not a hidden behind someone can barely make it out type of thing either. No, this was a clear, colored, taken photograph, with the girl's reflection being black and white. You could make out her face, her smile, her clothes, her hands, everything. It doesn't end there though. Dan says to me, "I told you I wasn't shitting you." I go to the next photo, same sort of thing. Family members have moved around and so is the girl. She's doing a different pose. She's smiling, showing her teeth. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. There was this black and white girl standing right in the mirror, smiling at me. Like she'd been there the whole time. I felt like someone had just thrown a bucket of ice-cold water over me. Like I was being watched. Like I wasn't welcome anymore, and I felt like I needed to leave. I put the photo back in the box, and not long after left. I still don't believe in ghosts or aliens or anything of that matter, but I know what I saw, and I know it scared the shit out of me. A few years ago, I was able to take a test, and they were going over a bunch of questions and flags and whatnot. At one point, the test giver said, "Has anyone here recently lost a loved one?" I thought to myself, nope. Then I thought, pretty weird. Why am I still thinking about that question? Then I thought, still pretty sure the answer is no, yet here I am still feeling weird about the question. Kind of odd. When I finished taking my test, I went back to work, sat down in my cubicle, and saw a note that said, "Call Grace," my dad's girlfriend. I called and she started crying, and I said something along the lines of, "It's okay, I know, you don't have to say it." I don't tend toward the supernatural in any way. Every story in this thread that I've read, I honestly just assume is either BS or is a misunderstanding of actual events. But whenever someone talks about unexplained experiences, I think back to the fact that I knew my father was dead hours before I could have known, and I can't explain it. Okay, so this is a true story that scared the shit out of me in a big bad way. Back when we were 18, I had a mate who reckoned he was getting haunted or stalked by this menacing black figure. I was kinda dubious. So one night, I'm sleeping over in his parents' big old wooden mansion. He gives me his parents' bed for the night. It was the perfect storm of creepiness. His stepmother had a massive porcelain doll collection facing the bed, and I hate those suckers. The family dog was an old Aussie sheepdog, but with full cloudy white cataracts covering his eyes, so he looked freaky as. Old house, porcelain dolls, blind dog with white, clouded eyes. Perfect. So, after midnight sometime, I wake up in his parents' bed, and cold wind is blowing through the open door in a closed house. Also, I got a feeling of intense terror. To top it off, the dog is hiding under the bed and crying. The dog is my proof it wasn't just a nightmare. Then a big, black, robed figure coasts in through the door and hovers over the four-poster bed, about 8 feet tall. Menacing, temp is icy cold, scared the shit out of me. It hovers for a few minutes while I try and wake up. Unfortunately, I am awake. Then I lie there, dead still, too scared to move, while the dog whines under the bed. I'm too scared to check on the dog because if it stares at me with those blind, cloudy white eyes, I will die. The dog was definitely scared as it stayed under the bed whimpering. Once I gathered the courage, I went to my friend's room and told him what happened. He calmly answered, "Now you know what I go through every night," rolled over and went back to sleep. That man. He eventually got the church to do an exorcism, which apparently worked. That's my story, and it is true. We were driving to my uncle's house, usually about 20-minute drive, and we were stuck in traffic. My mom was talking to me and my brother, and mid-sentence, everything stopped. The car wasn't moving, no one was breathing, clouds, other cars, my brother's arms going up in the air, any sounds. Like the radio, my mom's voice, car driving, everything just stopped. I didn't notice this until immediately after the pause, and the first thing I did was say, "Whoa, did you guys just feel that?" Everyone looked at me like, "Huh? Feel what?" And I replied saying, "It felt like everything just stopped for a second and started again, like in Mario when you press pause." They had no idea what I was talking about, but I remember that feeling and that moment all the time, and I still don't understand what exactly happened, but I know I felt everything stop and start. I saw a dead guy walking around casually. I graduated high school and lived in the same town while I went to college. A couple of years after graduation, I was stopped at a light, and the guy was crossing the street. I recognized him as Chris. One of my good friends had dated him, and we hung out a few times. He looked pretty pale, like he was on drugs. It didn't really surprise me, as that seemed like where he may have been heading back in high school. Whatever, no big deal. A couple years after that, I started hanging out with another girl from high school, and we mentioned seeing people around town from our graduation class. I mentioned seeing Chris. She gave me a blank look and said, "You saw who?" I confirmed, "Chris Jones. You know, short, dirty blonde hair, kind of tall, skinny guy." She paused and said, "He died the summer we graduated." I was like, "Wait, what? No way." She explained that he went onto the local lake, was doing drugs, fell off the boat, and he drowned. I later asked my other friend, who had dated him in high school, if this was true, and she confirmed. The guy I saw, casually crossing the street, was apparently a dead guy. In the house I lived in before this one, about 2 years ago, I was sitting in the living room couch watching some kind of show or another. To the left, there was a staircase that opened up into the kitchen, adjacent to where I was. As I was sitting there, I saw out of the corner of my eye that there was someone coming down the stairs. I thought it was likely my mom. I was living with my parents at the time, coming down for a late-night snack. Instead of seeing her, I saw what I can only describe as a tall black mass coming down the stairs. Somehow, I knew its intentions were good, so I wasn't scared, and nothing else happened that night. The next morning, without any mention of the incident from me, my mom starts in by saying, "I saw someone walking down the corridor upstairs." This was right around the time lights would inexplicably turn on and off all over the house. I was hunting raccoons one night on my wife's family farm and saw some creatures come out of the cornfield I've never seen before. It was bipedal, about 2 to 3 feet tall, had legs where the knee joints bent the opposite direction of traditional animals, was covered in short, spotty fur, had short, thin arms, think like a very skinny kangaroo, without a snout that stood more vertical and had weird legs. I've never found a description of another animal like it, that is even remotely close to the North Dakota-South Dakota border. I got a good look at it in clear light of my flashlight, maybe 10 seconds before it ran back into the corn. I don't believe in any cryptozoology or anything, but I know what I saw was not normal. Freaked me out pretty bad. As funny as it sounds, it almost looked like Al Gore's man-bear-pig drawing from South Park, but shorter arms and an animal head. I haven't heard a man-bear-pig reference in a long time, and as I got to the last sentence in that story, I was just like, I really wanted to just be like, this is super serial, guys. Anyway, I don't think many of you will get that reference, but it's a good South Park episode a million years ago. When I was younger, around 7, I started getting class dolls from my grandmother every year for Christmas. I didn't particularly like them, but set them up in my room anyway. After about 3 years, I'd accumulated about 10 of them. The most recent one I got was dressed up in Native American attire and looked eerily like me. I identify as Native American. Something about her just gave me the creeps. So I put her behind the rest of the dolls in my room. They were in a row of 7, and the other 3 behind them. I woke up the next morning to find the Native American doll now in front of a red-headed one, as if they switched places. I was a very superstitious child, and pulled her from the group and set her on my bed with a pen and paper, and told her I knew she was alive, and to write something before I got back. Crazy, I know. I went downstairs for a few hours, and when I returned, the doll was on the floor along with the pen. The paper was on my bed, still blank. I wasn't taking any chances, so I put her in the dumpster outside. Next morning I wake up, and all my doll heads are facing to the right. They usually face forward. And at the end of the line of dolls, the Native American one was sitting where they were all staring, facing forward. I freaked the f*** out and tore her apart limb by limb, and put every limb in a different dumpster, then gave every doll back to my grandmother. My mom never believed a word of it, and this is my first time recanting it, and I have goosebumps. To this day, if I see a doll in someone's home or even a store, I try like hell to avoid it, dolls. This is a brief account of an experience I had almost a year ago in the warehouse where I work alone. No one I've told has believed me, but perhaps you all will. I work in a warehouse that my father purchased. He bought it for 25% of its cost from a farmer who seemed very excited to be rid of it. It is in the middle of Mennonite country, with no neighbors for a half a mile around. Look out the window, you see cornfields and scraggly trees. Cell service? Forget about it. I work here alone, painting and preparing the front office portion for eventual functionality. To get to the front office, you must go through a hallway from the main warehouse into a secondary office, and then through another door into the front. I frequently hear bumps and thuds, and occasionally will go into the warehouse and feel air movement, but I've always attributed it to drafts and animal life in the roof. The only thing that was ever made me uneasy about the building is the fact that all the doors locked are reversed. Whoever installed those locks didn't intend to keep people out. They intended to keep something in. It never really got too freaky. Until one day, I was in the front office when I began to hear the thudding. I ignored it and continued to apply masking tape to the door I was working on. But this time, it was accompanied by a screeching sound. Not loud, but audible. I was freaked out, but convinced myself that it was just a pissed-off raccoon or squirrel that had found its way inside. I continued working until I heard the slam. The door to the secondary office had been shut. It sounded like it had violently slammed shut. I peeked around the corner and saw that I was right. The secondary door was now closed. I tried to logic it through my head that a strong draft had sucked it closed, although I knew there was no such draft. The thudding began again. Close this time. I've never been able to put a proximity on it, but now it sounded like it was right on the other side of the door. I froze, unsure of what was happening. My eyes locked on the door handle, which began to turn. The door disengaged its latch and slowly swung open. Wider, wider, nothing there. Nothing visible, no air movement, just quiet, so quiet. A quiet that seemed to overwhelm me with its presence. A quiet so thick I couldn't breathe. The quiet was shattered when the screech came again. This time it was clearly human, pained, angered, and emanating from the main warehouse. The door slammed. The entirely broke my frozen, fearful state. I ran. I got into my car and drove until I was in cell range to call my father. He didn't believe anything about the doors closing, but agreed that the building had something weird about it. He told me he'd be right out. Fast forward half an hour. My dad and I met up and drove back to the warehouse. I showed him the door that slammed, showing him that it was separated from both the front office and the main warehouse, so no draft could have closed it. I told him about the thuds, the screeching, and the sudden quiet that overcame the building. He decided that we should check the main warehouse. Emboldened by his presence, I led the way. Something you should know about this warehouse: it was formerly a furniture manufacturing place owned by a Mennonite farmer. They made handmade chairs, tables, etc. Because of all the cutting that went on, the floor is thickly coated with dust. We walked into the warehouse and saw nothing out of the ordinary. The dust was untouched, the doors were closed, the windows were locked. The only thing out of the ordinary was a hanging light fixture. It was hanging askew and swaying slightly, insisting we take a look at the mount to ensure it didn't just break loose. My dad grabbed a stepladder. He supported it while I climbed up and grabbed that swinging light. I looked on top of the light and saw a handprint, a single, fresh, inhumanly large handprint. No footprints in the dust around the light, no signs of a presence. I climbed down and switched places with my father. He saw it and said, "What the hell? There's been no one in here for years." He climbed down and told me he'd been suspicious of someone breaking in and stealing parts from the warehouse light system. He couldn't believe me that this wasn't human, that something wasn't right here. The last thing he said was, "Nothing is here. Next time just go back to work." And then, as if to show its presence, the thud returned. This time it wasn't just a thud, but more of an earthquake. The entire building felt like it moved. The heartbeat-like thud was then overlaid by the screech, the awful, awful screech. It felt like it was coming from the walls themselves. We ran and I haven't returned. My father hired someone to finish my job and has since moved into the office. He's heard the thudding, but thus far nothing has happened further. What actually happened? I don't know. Nor do I ever care to know. What I do know is that there is something paranormal in the building, and the man who sold it to us knew. I'll never forget the sound of that lock turning by itself, or the feeling of that thunderous silence. As far as haunted houses go, mine is pretty intense. We have had several experiences over the years, but this one's my favorite. I work and walk in from the garage door with my brother and sister. There's a door to your left when you come in. That is the downstairs bathroom that leads to a bedroom, my bedroom. We're all talking and coming through the door. Everything's normal when the bathroom door slams shut. The light comes out in the bathroom and you heard a woman's voice yell out. At first I believe it's my sister and we must have walked in on her when she was using the bathroom. I go around the house to the other door to the bedroom and enter. Lights out. Window locked from the inside. I go to check the other door leading to the bathroom. Locked as well. You can hear the sweeping motion of the feet as well as a shadow pacing the floor. I use a coat hanger to unlock the door after screaming for whoever it was to answer, and that I was armed. I believe I had a large metal rod. I turn the knob, open the door, A huge wave of cold air floods the room from the bathroom. No one was there. My sister was at a friend's house. The house was completely empty and locked up tight. An elderly woman passed away in the house in the late 70s. My room was her room because it was handicap accessible. A little background context. When my sister was in utero, she was originally part of a set of twins, but swallowed up her twin as the pregnancy went on. It's called a vanishing twin. This will later become relevant to the story, so bear with me. My sister, let's call her M for the purpose of simplifying the story, has always had trouble with sleepwalking. My mom has had her examined by several specialists. It's that bad. They've only ever eased the problem temporarily, however. She sleepwalks on average about 10 times a month. The time this story took place, about a month ago or so, I was home from college for the weekend. I often stay up late at night and decided to relax a little and watch some series before going to bed. It was about 1 a.m., I'd say. I was lying on my side watching my show with my headphones on. I could see the hallway in my peripheral vision. When I next looked up, I suddenly noticed my sister standing in the doorway. Her eyes were half closed. She looked like she was sleepwalking. I took my headphones off and saw her slowly walking toward me. When she got close, I felt my stomach clench and got the most intense feeling of dread I've ever experienced. She didn't look like my sister. Every facial feature was slightly off. The way an identical twin doesn't completely resemble the other twin. What gave it away weren't her physical features, though. It was her expression. She had this smile on her face, is what I'd guess you'd call it, since the corners of her mouth were turned upward. It didn't look like any smile I'd ever seen, though. It somehow encompassed every awful, evil feeling I've ever experienced, read about, and imagined feeling. It made me think she was going to start screaming at any moment and never stop. Every single hair on my body was raised. She was just staring at me. I noticed, dimly, that her eyes were wide open now. She didn't look like she was sleepwalking anymore. Eventually, I managed to say her name in an attempt to get a response out of her. She then stopped smiling and said, "No, I don't think we've been introduced. I'm Annie." I think I was actually paralyzed with fear when I heard that. Somehow, eventually, I managed to scream and shoved her away. My parents came crashing into my room. They thought someone had broken into the house. When they turned on the light, I knew it was M standing next to me again. Her face looked completely normal again. She was awake at this point. She blinked a bit and said she couldn't remember coming to my room. The reason why I was so freaked out, a few years ago my mom told me about the fact that M absorbed her twin in utero. But she also told me that she had kind of morbidly considered what she would have liked to call her second daughter. She told me she would have called her Annie. Don't know what happened, but I know at least what happened to me. It happened in college, conveniently right near Halloween. My friends at the time were quite diverse in our religious beliefs, and it being All Hallows Eve, my Wicca friend wanted to show us all his beliefs. I enjoy the paranormal, I always have. As a man of science, I enjoy trying to explain the explainable. Mostly, I enjoy the psychology of it, watching our brains trying to piece together things it wants to believe. The subconscious grasping at fragments of reality, resulting in a psychosomatic hallucination. He said he wanted to try to summon something. He said to trust him, and trying to remain skeptical, we indulged his request. He lit candles and turned off the lights as we formed a circle around the candles. We sat down and held hands as my friend bowed his head and began humming. He kept humming his Om as we all closed our eyes. Suddenly an image of a cottage appeared in my head. It was surreal and so clear. I could feel myself there. I was in a calm grass field. I was standing just at the forest edge when I slowly walked up the path to the cottage. It had 2 floors and was a natural wooden brown. I looked over and saw the window near the door was shattered. when suddenly, my girlfriend at the time screamed. She got up and ran out of the room. Another one of my friends jolted back and yelled, "Oh God, what did I see?" He then starts frantically talking about how he saw himself as a wolf. He then starts talking about the details. He was in a field. He ran toward a house. It was what I saw. Everything. It wasn't just some vague details, but everything from the field to the colors. Everything. I asked about the windows because I remembered one was broken. He said he saw himself jumping through it. We stared at each other and knew. We saw the same thing. We heard my girlfriend scream again, and we ran out of the room to check on her. She is covering in a corner crying. She's hysterical and won't stop crying about her children. She doesn't have any children. She's in tears crying out for them, crying out for children she doesn't have. We try to calm her down, but we can't. We ask her what happened when she says, "The dogs got them. They attacked them. Oh God, the blood." We tried to calm her down, but she kept crying until slowly we all became very silent, which she was describing was what we all saw, and we just sat in silence. I work in a restaurant, and one afternoon around 3 p.m. when it's really slow, I had gotten an order and needed to go into the walk-in cooler to get something to make it. And as I walked around the line and looked down the hall at the walk-in door, I saw a tall figure with a white t-shirt, gray cloth shorts like gym shorts, and dark tennis shoes walking into it, and the door closes behind him. I thought it was a bartender who worked there at the time, because he was a tall, slimish guy. I figured he was grabbing beer to stock the bar for the dinner shift. I opened the door and reached for what I needed and turned toward where the beer was to say something to him. Nobody was there. Looked the other way, nothing. I thought it was really weird. Grabbed what I needed and went out and finished my day. It wasn't until the next day, when I thought about it, I realized I could have been in that walk-in with an apparition. The door was the only way in or out, and I remember seeing the figure so clearly to be able to describe him above. I tried to get my GM to look at the camera that was pointed toward the general area, but he just blew me off saying ghosts aren't real, and I was full of it. But he seemed really against it. Like possibly he didn't want to know if it was real or not, and would rather just pass it off as my imagination. Worst part is, it never occurred to me to talk to any of the other managers about this to see if they'd been more willing to look at the video until after months had passed and the video was long gone. I know for a fact I saw that door close behind the figure. I just don't know if he had opened it himself or if someone else had opened it and it closed slowly after they walked out. So yeah, my only paranormal experience. This story is the only time I've ever experienced something unexplainable and had another person there to back me up so I didn't feel crazy. The fact that it was my girlfriend who would take the first chance she gets to call me crazy and confirms what we saw really drives it home. Me and her would occasionally go outside to look at the stars, and on this particular night, instead of driving out somewhere, we were lazy and just laid on a blanket on my back patio in southern Pennsylvania. The night was super clear, and it was during the summer. As usual, we were there for like an hour and didn't see any shooting stars. Then this one light appeared. In the night sky, it looked about the size and brightness of a star, maybe slightly bigger, like when you can see a planet. It was more orange-yellow than the typical white star. Whatever it was very far away. At first, I thought we had finally seen a shooting star, and could go back inside satisfied, because the bugs were starting to bite. Now imagine laying on your back. It started from behind the dogwood tree by my patio in my upper left field of view. My feet were facing away from the house, and I would have had to tilt my head back, looking upside down at the house to see it. From there, it moved slowly to the center of the sky. Then it stopped. A dead stop. Changed directions and at a breakneck speed and went across the dome of the sky toward the horizon back behind the dogwood. We each said nothing. Seconds later, it was back, moving crazy fast. Stopped cold again. Made a 90-degree turn. Went very slow. Accelerated insanely fast. Stopped. It just kept doing this in a random combination. It moved so unnaturally. The sudden extreme changes in speed and direction scared me. There's nothing on Earth that moves like that. It wasn't a firefly or a bug in our face or a searchlight. It was too irregular. It was up there with the stars. It ripped across the dome of the sky toward varying points in the horizon. Would be out of sight for a while and then come back. It just kept coming back. Finally, we broke the silence. We turned to each other, wide-eyed, and I said something along the lines of, do you see this shit? She just replied, yeah, want to go inside? To which I replied, yes. And we spent the rest of the night racking our brains as to what we saw. For the record, neither of us were under any influence, nor have we ever been. We saw this light. It was there. And it was way up there. If you saw the perspective of how far away it was and how unrealistically it moved around, it would send chills down your spine, like the ones I get from typing this out. I hear lots of stories about lights. Has anyone seen something like this? PM me. My inbox is blitzed from the stories still coming in on this post. If you want to compare notes on this, I would give anything to know what this was. I'm a non-believer of anything supernatural or paranormal, but none of my family is. A lot of their stories I chalked up to sleep paralysis, etc. But this one is my mother's, and as far as how it plays out in my head, I cannot think of an explanation. When she was like 13 or 14, she lived in Thailand with her family. They lived in an apartment building on the 7th or 8th floor. She was playing a Ouija board with her brother and 2 other Americans in the evening. So the sun was still out and there were people walking on the streets near the building. Obviously, people start asking about ghosts, demons, what have you. After a while of scaring themselves, a red glowing orb, like some kind of entity, floats in through the 7th story window, hovers in the middle of the room for half a minute or so, and then disappears entirely. All of them shit their pants and ran out of the room to where the adults were, and the adults sensed nothing and thought they were lying. To this day, more than 40 years later, neither of them relent about what they saw. I see my uncle regularly, and he has the same story as my mother. It makes no sense to me, but I simply can't believe it was a demon or Satan or some stupid shit like that. But I can't think of any rational idea for what would cause something like that. When I was younger, I went to a buddy's house for a sleepover. His mom came down randomly, and one thing went to another. She was talking about freaky shit that has happened to my family over the last couple of years. My buddy Justin's younger sister has a mental handicap. I'm not sure what it is. When his mom was telling us stories, she would just giggle and keep looking behind us. His mom told us the story of how one night there were fire alarms that went off randomly in the middle of the night, and the doors were opening and closing. Once it all stopped, they found a picture of her father face down on the ground, smashed, and no other pictures fell off the wall. They found out later that night that her father passed away. Later that night, after I heard that story and another of how my buddy always complained about a man at the end of his bed, I was freaked out. There were 3 of us total after his mom left us to try and sleep after the stories. He had a pull-out couch, and we set everything up for bed. One was going to be 1 floor and 2 on the pull-out. My friend Kyle is freaking out standing against a bookshelf, looking toward the open basement, and me and my friend, I looking beside him at the TV, trying to convince him to lay down. He kept saying, "Dad, I want to see if something is coming." He had his blanket wrapped around, standing there. Me and Jay eventually got fed up and we were like, let's go to sleep. And as I got up to turn the lights out, I leaned over the edge of the bed and reached out to turn the switch, and before I hit the light to turn the TV shut off and the lights turned out, scared the out of me. I jumped back into bed and I saw what looked like my friend with the blanket run into the darkness, and my other buddy just grabbed me and screamed. Then, as things calmed down a bit, I said to Jay, "Where the did Kyle run?" The friend with the blanket. And all of a sudden, he comes out from under the bed and said all he did was hit the ground when the lights went off. I told them, I swear on my life, I saw someone in a white sheet looking thing run into the darkness. They were freaked out. I was freaked out, and I couldn't leave the basement because the exit was in the path of whatever ran away, so I kept the TV on the rest of the night and never slept. Younger sister claimed to have a name for the ghost, apparently. It was a little girl named Jody. When I was a little kid, probably about 8 or 9, I was playing at our local swimming pool on my own. There were other people there, plenty of them, but none that I knew. I was not, and still am not, a strong swimmer, but being so young I had no fear of testing my limits. After a very short time in the deep end, I felt myself becoming very tired, and I sunk under the water. I remember this so clearly. My eyes were open, which was a big deal and almost unheard of for me, and I started to sink under the water. I literally thought to myself, here I go, I'm going to die today. And as I thought this, I took in a great big lung full of water. I sat there for a moment and no pain came. I breathed the water out and took in another heaping breath. Again, there was no pain. I just sat there in the bottom of the pool breathing, like I had done it every day. Eventually I felt rested and swam underwater to the shallow end of the pool, where I decided it was probably time to come up. That's when a little pain came, but not enough to cause a scene. I was fascinated with what had occurred and eager to try again, so I dipped my head under whatever and sharply inhaled the most gruesome and excruciatingly painful breath of water that I've ever had. I came up in a panic, and this time did cause a small scene. But to this day I still wonder, if I had never come back up for air, would I have been able to breathe water for the rest of my life? Was that some fork in the road, where the universe gave me an ultimatum and told me to choose between water or air and live with the consequences of my decision?